For generations, we have told the story of the lock backwards. We treat it as the invention of suspicion, a cold device born from greed, built by people who did not trust their neighbors. The real story is gentler than that, and far more human. The lock was not invented because people feared each other. It was invented because they finally had something to protect, and someone they loved on the other side of the door. Begin with the problem that started everything. For most of early human history, there was very little to lock away. People moved, they carried what they owned. Possessions were few, and a community was small enough that everyone knew everyone. But then something changed the shape of human life. People settled. They planted grain and stored it. They gathered tools, animals, cloth, and surplus. For the first time, a family could accumulate more than it could carry, and more than it could watch every hour of the day. That created a tender new vulnerability. A storehouse of grain was not just property, it was survival through the winter. It was the difference between a family that lived and one that did not. When you leave your food, your future, behind a door and walk away, you are trusting that it will still be there when you return. The problem was not greed. It was the unbearable weight of finally having something to lose. The solution appeared more than 4,000 years ago, and it is one of the oldest mechanical devices humanity ever made. In the ancient Near East, in the region of Mesopotamia, the people of that early world created what we now call the pin tumbler lock. The principle was simple and beautiful. A wooden bolt held a door shut. Inside it sat a series of small wooden pins that dropped into place and jammed the bolt. A large wooden key, raised with pegs that matched those pins, could lift them just enough to slide the bolt free. Only the right key with the right pattern could open it. Consider the quiet genius of that idea. These early builders had encoded a secret into a physical shape. The key was not just a tool. It was knowledge made solid, a pattern that only the right person possessed, and the unexpected consequence rippled outward in a way no one intended. The lock did not just secure a door. It created a brand new idea. The idea of a space that belonged to someone, a threshold that said, "This is mine, and you may not pass without my permission." These wooden locks spread and endured for a remarkably long time. A version of the same pin tumbler principle was used in ancient Egypt, guarding homes and temples along the Nile, and astonishingly, the basic idea never died. The pin tumbler lock that secures most of the doors in the world today, the kind your own house key fits into, works on the very same principle those Mesopotamian builders worked out 4,000 years ago. We did not replace their idea, we refined it. Across 40 centuries, the fundamental insight has held, which tells you how perfectly it answered a permanent human need. That brings us to the second great problem. And it is a problem of trust at a distance. Those first wooden locks were enormous, sometimes as long as a forearm, and the keys were heavy and obvious. They were hard to make, hard to carry, and easy to defeat with enough force. A lock that announced itself so loudly was as much a symbol as a security. It said, plainly and to everyone, "Here is something worth guarding." As societies grew richer and more crowded, people needed protection that was stronger, smaller, and more discreet. By the height of the Roman Empire, around 2,000 years ago, that need had produced a leap forward. The Romans began working with metal. They crafted small locks of iron and bronze, far more intricate than anything before. And they did something deeply human with the key. They made it wearable. Romans wore key rings on their fingers, small enough to slip onto the hand, so that a person could carry the security of their home with them wherever they walked. To wear a key was to announce that you were someone with something worth locking, a person of standing and property. The unexpected consequence here is one we still live with today. The Romans had turned the key into a personal object, almost an extension of the self. The security of your possessions was no longer fixed to a single great wooden beam. It traveled with you. The lock had begun its long journey from a fixed guardian of a storehouse into something intimate and portable, a small piece of metal that carried the whole idea of your private life. If you have ever felt that small reassurance of your own keys in your pocket, that quiet sense that your door is yours, you already understand something these Roman craftsmen were building toward. And if these forgotten histories move you the way they move us, you might consider walking a little further with us through them. For more than 1,000 years after Rome, the basic art of the lock advanced slowly. Medieval locksmiths became extraordinary craftsmen. And here we meet the third problem, which is the most fascinating of all. A lock can only ever be as good as the cleverness of the person who built it, set against the cleverness of the person trying to defeat it. This was the age of that silent contest. Locksmiths poured their genius into hiding the keyhole itself, building false keyholes, ornate covers, and elaborate disguises. They created locks of stunning beauty, guarded by intricate wards, shaped like animals, and adorned like jewelry. These were works of art as much as security. A great lock on a chest or a church door was a statement of wealth, devotion, and skill. The craftsmen who made them were respected artisans, and their finest pieces were treasured for generations. But for all their beauty, these locks shared a hidden weakness. They relied on disguise and obstruction rather than true mechanical strength. A patient and skilled hand could still find its way past them. The contest between the maker and the picker had no clear winner yet. It was waiting for one decisive turn. There is a human cost worth noticing in this part of the story. For most of these centuries, a good lock was expensive, and largely the privilege of the wealthy and the powerful, the church, the merchant, and the noble household. The ordinary person had far less to guard and far less protection for what little they had. The slow march of the lock from a rare luxury towards something almost everyone could own is, in its own quiet way, a story about ordinary people gaining the right to a private life of their own. That turn came in the years around the late 18th century, in the heart of the Industrial Revolution, and it changed the lock forever. In the 1770s, an English locksmith named Joseph Bramah designed a lock so intricate and so precise that he believed it could not be picked. He was so confident that he placed one in the window of his London shop with a public challenge. A generous reward awaited anyone who could open it. That single padlock sat there in the window, unbeaten and unopened, for more than 60 years. Around the same time, another English inventor, Bramah and Chubb, created a lock with an ingenious feature. If someone tried to pick it, the lock would jam and refuse to open even for the correct key until it was reset. It told the owner that someone had tried. These men were not merely building stronger locks. They were treating security as a science, with precision, mathematics, and rigorous testing. And the unexpected consequence of their genius was a strange, new kind of confidence. People began to believe, perhaps for the first time in history, that something could be made truly safe. That confidence was eventually humbled, and the moment is worth remembering. In the 1850s, at the Great Exhibition in London, an American locksmith named Alfred Hobbs publicly picked both the famous Bramah lock and the Chubb lock that had stood for so long as symbols of perfect security. It caused a sensation. The lesson he taught was a quiet and lasting one. No lock is ever truly unbeatable. Security is not a wall you build once and forget. It is a conversation that never ends between those who protect and those who would intrude. The Industrial Revolution carried this gift to almost everyone, as factories learned to produce precise metal parts cheaply, and in great numbers. The well-made lock stopped being a treasure reserved for the few. By the middle of the 19th century, a working family could buy a sturdy, dependable lock for their own front door. The peace of mind that had once belonged only to the wealthy was becoming the quiet birthright of ordinary people everywhere. Now we arrive at the deepest part of this story, the question hidden beneath every lock ever made. There is an old idea, repeated for a long time, that, in the most ancient and trusting human communities, there was no real concept of theft as we know it, because there was so little private property to steal and nowhere to hide it. Whether or not that was ever literally true, it points to something real. The lock and the very idea of stealing grew up together, hand in hand. You cannot truly steal what no one has claimed as their own. The lock was the device that drew the line. It said, "This belongs to me, and crossing this threshold without permission is wrong." In drawing that line, the lock did something profound to the human heart. It made private property real and physical. It allowed people to feel safe enough to build, to save, to plan for a future, to leave their home in the morning, and trust they would return to find it as they left it. So much of settled human life, the home, the shop, the savings, the quiet confidence to step outside your own door, rests on this single, small invention. But the lock also revealed something tender about us. We only lock away what we love and what we fear to lose. A locked door is not really a statement of distrust toward the world. It is a statement of how much something matters. The grain that fed the children through a long winter. The tools that earned a family its living. The letters, the keepsakes, the small and irreplaceable treasures of an ordinary life. Behind every lock in history is a person who had something precious and could not bear to lose it. That is the truth we so often miss. The lock is usually remembered as cold, mechanical, and suspicious. But trace it back to its beginnings, and you find the opposite. You find a family storing grain to survive the winter, a Roman wearing a key as a sign of a home they were proud of, a medieval craftsman pouring beauty into a guardian for someone else's treasures, an inventor staying awake at night, trying to give ordinary people the gift of peace of mind. The lock is one of the most human objects we have ever created. It was never really about keeping people out. It was always about protecting what is precious enough to keep close. And every time you turn a key, you are taking part in something more than 4,000 years old. A small, quiet act of care, repeated across all of human history, that says simply, and without a single word, "This matters to me, and I want to keep it safe."